The targets for claim and evidence are the same between persuasive writing and expository writing, and they fit well together. So we'll be studying 4 targets in one fell swoop today. They are important targets. Coming up with a good claim and providing supporting evidence is, of course, important for any piece of writing that you do, but beyond that, this really relates to the ability to form an opinion and support it reasonably, and that is a life skill that you will need no matter what you intend to do. We'll start with the target for claim. Again, this is for both W1B and W2B. At the 1 level, you can write a claim that is an opinion that can be supported. So, key here is that it has to be an opinion. You can't use a fact for a claim. It has to be something that you've come up with on your own, and that there is some kind of support out there. 2 level, moving up, your claim directly includes the topic and continues to be an opinion that can be supported, but it may be missing a few other key elements of a great claim, such as being assertive and not including any slanted language. At the 3 level, your claim directly includes the topic, is assertive, includes no slanted language, and is an opinion that can be supported, so 4 characteristics that I'll be looking for. And at the 4 level, it also will include a qualifier that connects all evidence. And we're going to talk about what all these concepts mean in just a moment. So here are these key concepts that I need to see a really solid claim in any piece of writing. The first thing first is that it includes the topic. And I don't just mean that it sticks to the theme of whatever it is that you're talking about, but primarily that it includes the specific noun that you happen to be talking about. In other words, no pronouns like it, they, you, he, she. Be specific here. Okay? Even if that means being a bit repetitive in your introduction, you should give the very specific topic of the piece that you're working on. As far as being assertive goes, take your stand and stick to it. This is not the place to mention a counterclaim. Don't bring up the counter. You can do that later, in fact you should, but you certainly don't want to do it in your introduction, or at least not in your claim. So don't even acknowledge that there are other opinions out there. This is your chance to give your opinion. It should include no slanted language, and slanted language is language that is very black and white. So for example, always and never are slanted terms. Everyone is a slanted term. And it's a very, very rare thing in this world that a slanted word would be true. Okay? I mean, there's usually some variety in whatever it is you happen to be talking about. And when you use slanted language, if someone doesn't fit into whatever category that you've made, they are immediately going to be able to take a shot at your claim and say, hey, you're wrong because not everyone, or hey, you're wrong because it is not always the case. So do avoid those types of words. Of course, as far as it being supported, make sure that you can actually find the support. I think most opinions can probably be supported by somewhere, or something somewhere, even if that something somewhere is wrong. There's a lot out there in this world. But make sure that you have access to the evidence, and that you're not just throwing one opinion at me over and over. And then the qualified part here is qualified. This is the 4 level. And to qualify something really means to give reasons. Okay? And those reasons will be the basis of your essay. So you give your opinion, but then you give your reasons, which will later become your evidence. You're tying directly into your evidence in your claim, or hinting at what is to come. Okay? That's another way to think about it. Now here's some examples for both persuasive writing and expository writing. Let's start with the persuasive writing. It needs to change immediately. All right, well, I've got a pronoun right here, and I can read that and be like, well, what needs to change immediately? I have no idea what you're talking about. And in theory, that would have appeared earlier in the introductory paragraph, as the claim should always come at the end of it. But as I said, you want your claim to be able to stand alone and be a strong statement, so avoid those pronouns. Immediately is a slanted word as well. It's hard to make big changes in a very quick fashion. If you haven't discovered that yet, you will. And as frustrating as it can be, it's really genuinely a truth for most things in this world. So immediately is a word that's probably going to get up some dander of the people who could be reading, and a word to avoid. Much better here, the American education system. Now I have my what. The American education system should include more vocational training, again, very specific here, to better address the needs of the modern student. Well, here's where I've got my qualifier in place. Why should they include more vocational training? In other words, make that change. Well, to better address the needs of the modern student economy, and I can build my evidence off of that. So there's my qualifier right there. As far as expository writing goes, now expository writing is writing that is meant to reveal something, not necessarily to convince. So you'll see expository writing in particular if you're doing anything literary, if you ever decide to analyze a text that we've studied in class. Research that is not meant to change someone's mind or inspire some kind of action is also often expository writing. So I'm going to use the same text for our expository example that we've been studying in our literature, and that is Wilfred Owen's Dulce et Decorum Est. For a example of a claim about it, the poem is about war. Well, okay, so this is pretty vague here, right? Like, what poem? And war is also a pretty big statement. I mean, there's so many different things you can talk about as far as war goes. Let's get a little bit more into that. A better example, notice I'm giving the exact poem, and I'm giving both author and title. If you're ever doing a literary analysis for your expository writing, you should give both the author and the title of the text in the claim. And then I'm moving beyond just about war. I'm giving a very specific, assertive claim. It reveals the effects war has upon soldiers both during and after battle. And my qualifier and what I'll talk about in my evidence, both during and after battle, and we're talking specifically about the effects. Okay, so those are the key words that I can tie into with my evidence later on. So that is my qualifier. Once we've got a solid claim, we're ready to build with our evidence. And again, they work nicely together, these two targets, claim and evidence. So we'll go right into that. The target for evidence, again, same between both persuasive and expository writing. Starts with the one level I can give evidence that supports my claim, but it's limited or vague. And limited, this would be if you can give me only one or two body paragraphs to support your concept. Vague, think pronouns, think no support. At a 2 level, it supports your claim, so it's not limited or vague. You're going to have 3+ to use in your essay, and it's specific. At the 3 level, your proficiency level and what you should be aiming for, your evidence is inferential, and we'll talk about what that term means next, and it still supports your claim. At the 4 level, we're still inferential, still supports the claim, but the add-on here is that it considers audience and purpose, or it could do both, but it doesn't have to, connects to or builds on other evidence. And again, we'll talk about what that means. So good evidence, what I'll be looking to see, of course, is that it supports the claim. And key here, and this kind of ties into being assertive with your claim in the first place, is stick to one side. Okay? Especially with persuasive writing. I've seen sometimes people, they want to be fair, they want to acknowledge that there is a counterclaim, but sometimes they give as much development to the counters as they do to their actual side, and you're not going to convince anyone that way. So make sure that the majority of your evidence supports your side, especially persuasive writing. In expository writing, that's not going to be as much of an issue. Inferential, again, this is what you need to be proficient in grade level this year. Inferential means you're basically giving your own opinion, and inference combines what you've observed with what you know. Okay. So if you're talking about what's in a text, what you read, saw, with background information. And it results really in another opinion, but you can consider a supported opinion. Okay. And we're going to look at some examples of that. A 4-level evidence will consider audience and purpose or build off other audience. or other evidence, excuse me. Now, considering audience and purpose really means taking into account what types of evidence will be best suited for who's going to be reading your paper. Please try and consider who else might be interested in what you're writing about, and don't just consider me, your teacher, as your audience, but really think about the topic overall. If you are, for instance, doing a persuasive piece and it's about change in a school, like the example that we've seen earlier, your audience will be school board members. Your audience will be government officials who have the power to make that change. What types of evidence will be more convincing for them? That's what you'll need to think about. As far as building off other evidence, if there are any other avenues you can explore related to one of your evidence, then do so. So for instance, if you talked about how that change in the school might help students, consider, would it also help teachers? Would it also help the administrators of a school? Those could be separate paragraphs that would build off of each other, each one talking about a different group of people and how they would be supported by the change. All right, we'll start with some examples here for the persuasive writing claim that we've already worked up. The claim is the American education system should include more vocational training to better address the needs of the modern student and economy. And as a reminder, a qualify here and what we need to connect to from our claim to our evidence in particular is that we're better addressing the needs of the modern student and economy. An example of a piece of evidence: by 2018, nearly 1/3 of American job openings will require vocational training. Okay. Well, let's think about this. Does it support the claim that there needs to be more vocational training? Absolutely. I mean, it's got vocational training right in it, and it's talking about the need of 1/3 of all job openings. Yes, that does support it. So as far as meeting that particular piece of a good evidence and what the target asks for, you're certainly at a 1 or a 2 level. But it's missing a few things. Good evidence, of course, should be inferential. It should be combining what you've read, what you've observed, with what you already knew. This is just about what you read. I mean, it's got a citation in it even. This is just an observation taken from a text. In other words, it is not inferential. We need to combine this fact with what we know and form an opinion. And we can do that below. The job market needs people with both traditional 4-year degrees and vocational training. Now, I'm building off of the fact that it's 1/3 of American job openings. So if 1/3 will be vocational training, that means 2/3 are still going to be 4-year degree types of jobs. So we've got both of those based on the observation I saw in my fact. But we're still helping reveal that there is a need in the job market, and that ties into the economy aspect of the claim. So, does it support the claim? Yes. Is it inferential? Yes. We're building off of that fact that we used as a bad example. As far as considering audience and purpose and building off other evidence if we want to earn a 4. Is this going to be convincing to government officials? Well, absolutely, because it's their job to worry about the job market. They are supposed to be passing policies that should help the job market. So that in itself is going to grab their attention. And if we want to build off of this evidence with other evidence that would relate to it, guess what? We can talk about other avenues of the economy. It's not just about the job market, it's about the money that comes in with that too. How much money would that put into the economy if we had the ability to fill those openings versus if we didn't? We could have an evidence about that. Okay. Now taking a look at expository writing here, and we're again working with the claim that we developed earlier. Wilfred Owen's Dos et decorum est reveals the effects war has upon soldiers both during and after battle. We are building in particular upon effects during and after battle. Now, an piece of evidence, Owen describes soldiers as, quote, beggars under sacks, to show how run down they are. We pulled that quote directly from the poem, and while it's awesome to use quotes to support a claim, it's not an appropriate thing to do in your evidence, because that's, once again, just pulling in what you've read, not actually creating your own opinion from it. So I want to take that and turn it into my own opinion by combining it with what I already know. Instead of using the quote right in my evidence, I could say Owen paints a vivid image of rundown soldiers to show how damaging the war is on their bodies and minds. And here I'm connecting in to my claim. I'm talking about the effects. And then I can go on to and pull other quotes. I can use this particular quote to support it as a detail. I can pull other quotes from the beginning section of the poem that show how rundown those soldiers were, because there were many of them. So that would be a very solid piece of evidence. Does it support the claim that we're talking about the effects of war, both during and after battle? Absolutely. Is it inferential? Yes. Does it consider audience and purpose? Well, certainly. If we're talking about a literary analysis piece, we want to show that we understand the text, and we're already referencing the author. And then, of course, we're implying that we're going to kind of give examples of this. To build off of this and give other evidence that relate to it, if I want to earn a 4 in that particular route, I could go on to talk about vivid imagery in the mental effects that are shown later. I could go on to talk about the vivid imagery that he uses also when he talks about how people try and encourage young men to go into the forces and what he uses with that imagery. So I could build on that.